My name is Robert Milton Kelly Jr., and I'll be 68 this year, 2019. My dad's name is Robert Milton Kelly Sr., and my mother's name is Marjorie Miranda Pinto. A little bit about my childhood in a few words. Basically, it sucked. I was probably third grade. I struggled in school. School was just a big thing for me. I really struggled that way. And they kept me back in the third grade. And then when I finished that third grade, they wanted to keep me back again, but they didn't think they could. And it was like fourth grade. I always remembered this. My dad said he basically just gave up on me. Rather than to help me, take the time to help me, he just got mad at me. And then he finally just gave up. He says, it's just not worth it. And I've never have forgotten that one. And I always thought, if I ever have children of my own, I know that it can be different than that. So there was a little resentment there, and that was probably the beginning of my ornery streak. I grew up, I continued to grow up, and I had my little friends in the neighborhood that I lived and that type of thing. And as I grew older, I would work on the farms. I was in about the sixth grade, and I lived alone out on the farm. Lived in the barns that were there, and I would work all summer. And that's kind of how I grew up as a kid. That's all I really knew was working. I was pretty much a loner, and I got to be my best friend. And I've spent a lot of time pondering things and thinking about things, and that's how I got through it all. I've got to be one of the most naive persons that ever lived, because I probably had a lot of big challenges, but didn't even know what they were, because nobody spend the time helping you or working with you. I was just always found myself alone, working. That was just it. I think one of the first persons that ever really took a real interest in me was Glenn Roundy. And he just, for whatever reason, saw the good in me, or saw the potential that I had, and so I was kind of drawn towards him that way. This would be in high school. I remember, I had friends that probably didn't have my best interests in heart, but, and I tried to be like some of those older boys, and they smoke and drink and stuff like that, and I'd try smoking, and Glenn knew that I was smoking a little bit out on the farm, but he'd always come up to me and say, Box, that's the one thing I really like about you, is that you don't do any of that stuff. Yeah, I look back on it now, and he knew I was trying to. I never really could, but it was just the pains of growing up. So my mom, she was a good mother. She was a really good mother, and I was closest to my mom than I was. I was definitely closest to my mother, and she never learned how to drive, and her life was a hard life growing up, and I think she went as far as junior high school maybe, and then she worked in the rope factory in Massachusetts, rope factory, and that was her life. But she was a good mother, and she didn't grow old gracefully, that's for sure. But when us kids growing up, she was a good mother.
What do you mean grow old gracefully?
Well, in later life, and she my dad wasn't the easiest person to live with, and you know, she had challenges, you know, drinking challenges and stuff like that, and then she kind of grew. As she grew older, she was probably a little more bitter, a little more arrogant, and a little more, you know, outspoken. Probably because she didn't feel very good, but it was a struggle for her towards the end. Describing my dad in my childhood, he was just hands off. It was, as long as he was happy, that's really all that mattered. And you know, it was pretty hands off. It just, you know, he just didn't have the time to, or didn't want to take the time to do much with his kids.
Do you have a
I mean, he you know, I make him out to be the bad guy, but I mean, he was, that was just, you know, he grew up in a broken home and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, you know, it makes it hard for him to, which was one of the things that I thought in my mind. I'm sitting there going, if I ever have any kids, I'm not going to treat them like that. I want to be involved with them, and I want to encourage. That's the one thing I think that was lacking, was the encouragement, and that taking the time to. It takes time to encourage people, especially little people. You know, if you just take the time to encourage them and magnify the goals, or magnify an event in their life that can help them move forward. That just means it's just so. It just helps their personalities and their egos, and it just makes it so much better for them. I think one of the most memorable moments when I was young is I worked on the farm all summer, and I made enough money to buy a 10-speed bicycle, and I was pretty proud of that bicycle, and I still have it today. And as a kid, I rode bikes. It didn't matter where it was. I could ride a bike for all day long. One time I rode a bike from Jacksonville, Arkansas to Little Rock, and it was just, you know, I just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed being out in the open with riding my bike and just being part of nature and seeing nature. And I remember riding through the backwoods there, and on that particular day, I saw 2 tarantulas crossing the road. I remember that, and they were big too. I mean, these babies were huge, and I remember stopping and looking at them and kind of playing around with them a little bit and going on and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed getting on a bike and just taking off. Didn't matter where I was going. I could be gone for hours, and I just enjoyed. That was some of the most enjoyable times that I had as a kid growing up, was riding a bike. Well, my senior year, my dad moved to Colton, Washington, up by Pullman, between Pullman and Lewiston, Idaho. And that was my senior year, and I got up there, and I just hated that place. I didn't like the people up there in that area, and they didn't like me, and it was just a mutual thing, and that was fine with me. And the morning, I graduated that year up there, and the next morning, I got in my little car and I left home, and I never came back. That was it. I was done with it. And just went out on my own and tried to make my life. I had to do something, and so I went back to Pasco, and I started working for Glen Roundy. And I ran the harrow beds and the swathers and the balers and changed water, and that's where I was, and that's all I knew. Well, alcohol was my relationship with alcohol. That was probably the part of my life that why I'm still here, I have no idea. But you know, at that time, in my home, in my house, in my home, you know, when I was with my mom and dad, drinking and smoking was acceptable, and I certainly did my part. And the first time I ever got drunk was like in the 6th grade, and I struggled with alcohol all the way through middle school and high school, and even after high school. And then one day it was like I knew kids that were killed in car accidents and, you know, drug or alcohol, and the kids do. And I got to thinking that I was no better than anybody else, and if I continued to go down this road, it's going to go one of two ways. I was going to die an alcoholic at an early age, or I was going to go another way and see what happened, or what kind of a life I lived. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do, was quit. And that was not easy. That was hard. And the most difficult part of that, trying to get out of that situation, was I needed to find new friends. That was the biggest challenge, was the friends I had all were doing the same thing. And it wasn't so much the drinking. I could get past that, but it was just I needed new friends, people that would encourage me to do the right thing and know that it was right.
So you said you struggled with alcohol in middle school. What does that mean?
Means I'd be drinking every weekend.
Where'd you get the alcohol?
I'd get it from my parents, or I got it where I worked at. The alcohol was just so readily available, and that was the challenge. Is getting alcohol to drink at those ages, at that age and everything like that, was just not a problem. It was just there. Well, the first car I ever had was a '51 Ford 2-door, and it was a nice little car. You know, they got me where I needed to go. And then when I graduated high school and I was working for Don Roundy, I saved up enough money to buy my first new car, which was a '70 Dodge Charger. And I felt pretty good about that. You know, it was the first new thing I'd ever had in my life. Well, that car, you know, it had a 383 Magnum pistol grip 4-speed, which was a muscle car. It was considered a muscle car. I wished I had it today. It was quite the little car. And the speedometer on that thing said 100, it would go up to like 160, 180 miles an hour. And I had it one time. I was going down the freeway and I was going to see how fast it would go, and I had it up to about 140, 45 miles an hour. And I could tell the way that the car was going down the highway, kind of like this, that it was getting ready to fly. So, and I'm sitting there going, this car is so light on this road right now, and I thought, this is fast enough. And so I backed off. That's as fast as I've ever been in a car. And yeah, but it was a nice car. It had a white vinyl top, white interior. It was a light green, and it would go like the Dickens. Great car.